Okay, Anna, I was going to ask you about how you think the family court views appropriate parenting orders for different age groups. So I think 0 to 5 is one segment, and then 5 to 12, and then obviously 12 to 15 or 18. Yeah.
So we're looking at under school age, primary school age, and then high school age.
Yes.
So the family court has to consider, as the paramount consideration, the child's best interest when making a parenting order. So informing that is always going to be the child's developmental stage. It's one of the factors, but it's a factor that means that we see commonalities between those parenting orders for those particular ages. So with children 5 years and under, they're at a developmental stage of forming a primary attachment bond with their primary attachment figure, and we know that that's fundamental for that to be formed securely, for a secure attachment to be formed by the time the child is about 5. Otherwise, we know the outcomes for children in their relationships in later life are not really good. So the court will favour the child spending more time with the primary attachment figure, but try to enable meaningful time with the other parent. So classically we see the child living with the primary attachment figure, but spending maybe some daytime on the weekend and some midweek afternoon time with the other parent, or where the other parent has been quite involved in the child's life before separation, the child's care before separation. We might see some overnight time, but there is really a reluctance to allow too much extensive time away from that primary parent. So we don't often see more than 1 or 2 consecutive nights in a fortnight, maybe a week. And also for young children, we know that they don't transition well between parents, particularly for overnight time. So there's a focus on trying to reduce the number of transitions. Yeah, so we normally see sort of some weekend time, maybe overnight, and then some midweek time. So they're regularly still seeing that parent. But once the child starts primary school, then that, where in their infancy they've had that sort of quite minimal time with the non-primary attachment figure, we see it evolving incrementally to increase the number of nights. Not usually the frequency. Usually we still don't see a lot of transitions, because that's still hard for kids in that primary school bracket. But we see, maybe that weekend time extending from a couple of nights every fortnight to Friday's school pickup to Monday's school drop off, and some time midweek in the evening, or maybe a Wednesday overnight. And then by 12 to 15, children are really often have strong views about who they should spend time with. And as they, certainly from 12, their views are starting to be given some serious weight. And as they approach 14 and 15, they're really going to be determining who they spend time with. And we say they vote with their feet. And that's really encouraged by the court. So with that developmental stage, we're looking at the child gaining independence and forming stronger relationships with peers and siblings. And so the parental relationship isn't so favoured, and that attachment is sort of given sometimes secondary consideration to these peer and sibling relationships. And so the child will really be maybe choosing who they spend time with. And that's building their independence, and their testing of boundaries. And
so it's rare we sort of see a matter where you would have an application on behalf of a sort of 12 to 15-year-old, because you usually do know where they're positioned.
Exactly.
And the court, I suppose, looking at the best interests, if we get to the court stage, does want to know what the children's views are.
Yeah, exactly.
So they will be expressed pretty quickly at that age.
That's right. And the court, I think they're reluctant to make orders about a 15 or 14 or 15-year-old, because they know that the parent's not necessarily going to have control to comply with that order, because it's the parent that has to comply. So, you've heard judges say, tell me why I should be making an order about a 14-year-old, because it just seems counterintuitive for a child of that age.
Who's going to do what they need to do at that stage. And I suppose also what we're seeing is the primary parent is not as sort of historically what we used to be
Yeah,
as well.
that's right.
And, you know, sort of you through COVID as well, being for a lot of people forced to be home and then taking on different roles, that primary parent, even from that young age, is sort of interchangeable. Well, sometimes it can be both.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. You know, when we look at primary attachment, it's not necessarily how much time this child's, or the parent with whom the child spent the most time, but the parent who's most responsive and appropriate to the child's needs. And if both parents have taken that role fairly equally, then the child's going to most likely have a primary attachment with both parents, and then that will inform, and the court will acknowledge that, and parenting orders will be appropriate to those circumstances.
That's right.